and unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000,000,000 kalpas. Happy to see and listen to, remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Advaita's words. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm going to do a couple things this morning. I'm going to keep you here for 3 hours. Got a lot to talk about. In all seriousness, though, it's been a tough week. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. The mind is everything. What we think, we become. I want to start off by reading a poem before I get started talking here. It's called Fear by Khalil Gibran. It is said that before entering the sea, a river trembles with fear. She looks back at the path she has traveled, from the peaks of the mountains, the long winding road, crossing forests and villages, and in front of her she has a vast ocean. That to enter there seems nothing more than to disappear forever. But there is no other way. The river cannot go back. Nobody can go back. To go back is impossible in existence. The river needs to take the risk of entering the ocean, because only then will fear disappear, because that's where the river will know it's not about disappearing into the ocean, but of becoming the ocean. It's good to see everyone today. I do look forward to seeing everyone on Sundays. We're celebrating Memorial Day weekend. My grandfather was in World War II. My great-grandfather was in World War I. Don't know much before that, although we have ancestors who've all back to England, so I'm sure there's something else in there too. In my hometown, I live in a small town, we line the square with flags to commemorate those who have died serving our country and our fellow Americans. Town square this time of year is really pretty. Flowers are blooming, the trees are green, the grass is green. It's a delightful place to sit and observe the world in action. Violent events over the past several weeks, and I should probably caveat that with over the past eons, have been on everyone's mind. It's easy to get caught up in the mounting tragedies and introducing doubt in our minds about the goodness of the world. I want to touch on that today. But I want to say that, first off, that there is good in the world, and that there are people that care about the well-being of their fellow humans. Haitian and I spent last Thursday visiting DMARC, Moore Area Religious Council. They have a food pantry, food banks, and we've volunteered with them before. They recently moved into a new building down here, 100 Army Post. It's been a number of things over the years. I think it was originally a grocery store, but anyway, it was amazing to see the people there, to see the people who work there, to see the people who support them. It was a good place to visit this week, and they had their annual meeting. But now let's get on to fear and uncertainty. For those of you that know me, my personal life has been crazy over the past year. And in that time, there's been a tremendous amount of fear. I'm in my 50s. And I've seen and encountered many different experiences in life, just like most of you. I've struggled with anxiety and fear most of my life. I've dealt with these feelings in many ways over those years, including turning to substance abuse, exercise and running, education and learning, and ultimately meditation. Past couple of years have been tough not only for me, but for many people. While COVID might seem like an obvious contributor to the anxiety and fear in our lives, it is by no means the only thing. The underlying uncertainty we continually face manifests throughout our lives. There are many events that occur in the world around us that don't make sense, that bring about incredible fear and suffering to many people. The recent events in the news surrounding gun violence, mass casualties, climate disasters, and social division underscore the tragic circumstances that are encountered in American life. These events and others like them continually push us through cycles of fear and grief, including denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and unfortunately, ultimately acceptance. I'd like to share with you some personal reflections of fear and uncertainty in my life, and the unsteadiness that can be encountered from moment to moment. When I was preparing for this talk, I encountered a nuanced version of Buddhist Four Noble Truths. I decided to include it here. So it goes like this. The first noble truth: there is fear. The second noble truth: there is a cause of fear. The third noble truth is there is freedom from fear. And the fourth noble truth is that there is a means to attain freedom from fear. First thing I want to mention about overcoming fear and uncertainty is I don't necessarily know how you overcome fear and uncertainty. How do I navigate the world with a mind that isn't satisfied with not knowing, with not being certain? How can I not be overcome with fear? This is hard to answer. To the mind, the experience of life is not a straight line. On the one hand, I don't know for a very basic reason, because I don't know that I can ever be certain about what the next moment brings, let alone know what about the future, which hasn't even happened. Yet I have a mind that could be like your mind. I have a mind that wants to figure it all out. But I can't, because I don't know what the next moment holds. I notice this impulsive mind of wanting to always try to figure that out, how to navigate the world ahead of me of uncertainty in order to feel more certain. There's this striving to feel more certain, to have an understanding of what's coming next. Importantly, I want to underscore this, tomorrow won't bring any more certainty into your life. Maybe you'll find more certainty around particular things, plans, or events. You might notice in yourself that same kind of impulsive wanting of some kind of correct path. But then you realize that the next moment, the next unfolding moment, is going to have just as much uncertainty. The problem isn't us being thrown into a world that confronts us with so much uncertainty. Rather, how does the mind relate to the uncertainty? I think that this was what the Buddha was curious about. How is the mind relating to human experience? And I want to be just a bit more precise about this in terms of what I'm saying. I'm confronted so often with uncertainties about what I'm thinking might happen in the next moment, or the next day, or the next week, or the next year. That's what my mind is so often dealing with. It happens over and over, the likes, the dislikes, the delusions and fears. I want to share something that I think that was attributed to Bodhidharma. He says that the mind is like the wood or stone from which a person carves an image. If he carves a dragon or a tiger and seeing it fears it, he is like a stupid person creating a picture of hell and then is afraid to face it. If he does not fear it, then his unnecessary thoughts will vanish. Not engaging in ignorance is wisdom. Not creating delusions is enlightenment. This is what we do. Our mind creates mental projections and then we react to them. The mind produces sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, and from them arises greed, anger, and self-delusion, with all the accompanying likes and dislikes that go with it. This is how it happens. The mind carves a scary thought, perhaps a dragon, a tiger, or some other creature that looks frightening. This is really the dilemma. That is how the mind is creating this fear from uncertainty. Mark Twain mused about a lot of things in life, and I grew up loving to hear his quotes. One thing I think is relevant in this situation goes something like this. I'm an old man and I've known a great many troubles, but most of them never happened. Isn't what he's describing the same idea, namely that the mind is seeing these dragons and tigers, these newfound fears the mind is conjuring up about what might happen next, involving these frightening creatures? I find the uncertainty of the dead of night to be the most frightening. The mind is malleable and loose from sleeping, with conscious and unconscious thoughts flooding the mind. But my slumber doesn't allow me to observe these thoughts, only react. Your mind might be like my mind, in that my mind wants to figure out what these creatures are going to do. What are they going to do next, these dragons and tigers that are created by my mind? And what might happen in the next moment, the next hour, the next day, or even the next decade? I want to put out that this impulsive mind isn't entirely unskillful. Because the Buddha was human, he faced fears like the rest of us. How would it be if, in the dark of the month, with no moon, the Buddha entered the most strange and frightening place, near tombs and in the thick of the forest, that he might come to understand his fear and terror? And when he did so, perhaps a wild animal would approach, or the wind rustled the leaves, and he might think, perhaps the fear and terror now comes. And being resolved to dispel the hold of that fear and terror, the Buddha remained in whatever posture that arose, sitting or standing, walking or lying down. The Buddha did not change until he faced that fear and terror in that very posture, until it was free of its hold on him. And having that thought, he did so. By facing the fear and the terror, he became free. In that moment in the forest, the Buddha found freedom from fear by facing it and recognizing it as a temporary state of mind. He goes on to make a helpful distinction between unskillful and skillful fear. Unskillful fear has such a great argument, which is because it knows that practically anything can happen in the next moment. It might. Sometimes it feels like a really convincing reason to keep on worrying and being scared. However, it isn't a good reason to remain gripped by fear in the present. We can't know the future, and so allowing fear to hold us prisoner in the present is ultimately unskillful. Skillful fear, on the other hand, is observing it, becoming intimate with it, and discovering feelings like love at the root of fear. We can use fear skillfully by redirecting its energy and our attention toward more wholesome virtues like courage and kindness. You might notice that in some ways, that is the nature of fear. Perhaps not all fear, but mostly a fear of what might happen next. If I'm in pain, I'm worried or fearful of what might happen next with that pain. And what could potentially happen then? My mind will be lost in confusion. In this, I can see the underlying sense of wanting to be in control of what I was thinking and seeing. But fear rears its head. And what hits my heart is the essential realization that I'm not in control. I really want to be in control. And then there's this kind of managing in some kind of right way, right? I want to be in control. I'm not doing it the right way. I've got to do it the right way. What's the right way? And then you do something and it's just... As a father, I experienced this with my kids. I have this sense, you might know how it is, when there's someone close to you and you wish only the best for them, and you become afraid of what might become of their life because of how they live their life. As a parent, it worries me, translation here, being fearful. I want to figure out a way of intervening to make their life better and easier somehow. I'm hoping that their life will be okay and turn out for them in their way. And you might hear another part of what I'm just hoping for something better for them, which isn't necessarily skillful. But I do want it. Fear is typically defined as an uneasy feeling, a sense of anxiety, of being afraid. In order to understand fear, Buddha said it was necessary to understand the human condition. The first condition he described was pain and our reaction to it. He indicated that physical pain is usually exacerbated by mental pain. Mental pain involves both anxiety and emotion. The second condition was the experience of continual change in our lives. Examples of change that affect humans include experiences of gain and loss, praise and criticism, as well as happiness and grief. There are many. Our human nature is to attach to things in life and hold on to them as long as possible. We always have fear in the back of our minds that things will change and we will lose out on something. The next condition was referred to as body and mind, or the five aggregates of form, feeling, perceptions, impulses, and consciousness. We chant this in the Heart Sutra. Each of these aggregates is conditioned by attachment. We tend to perceive body and mind as mine and belonging to me. When things change and we lose our control, we are fearful, resentful, and anxious. The next two conditions center on our volitional actions, commonly referred to as karma, along with the cycle of rebirth. We are responsible for our intentional actions of body, speech, and thought. Our future existence depends on karma. These conditions can result in a fear that stimulates a positive response by motivating us to practice and meditate in order to change our intentions so that we avoid wrongdoing, know our own minds, and gain wisdom. We may understand fear better if we turn to our attention to the essence of the Buddhist teaching and the Four Noble Truths. As the Buddha, and I'll do it again, sorry, this is the core of the teaching. As the first Noble Truth states, there is suffering. The Buddha mentioned birth, old age, sickness, and death as sources of suffering. The Buddha mentioned we enjoy celebrating birth and life, but the Buddha talked about existential suffering as a cause of fear as well. We have anxiety about getting old, getting sick, and dying. The Buddha went on to say that separation from what we love can cause suffering. The fear can arise even before anything happens because we don't want it to happen, and so we attempt to control the outcome. We are often afraid that we will be stuck in the situation forever. Lastly, when we realize that we may not get what we want, that is also fear, anxiety, dissatisfaction, or suffering. The Buddha concludes that clinging to our bodies, feelings, and perceptions, impulses, and consciousness is suffering. He taught that our attention should point inward, not outward. Dogen suggests that we turn the light inwardly to illuminate ourselves. In the second Noble Truth, the Buddha mentions craving as the cause of suffering. When we attach to our craving, that is suffering. Anxiety and fear create a feedback loop that inflames and perpetuates this cycle. The third and fourth Noble Truths deal with cessation of suffering and the path of practice that leads to its cessation. This gives us hope in dealing with our uncertainty. The Buddha stressed that we should pay attention to our attachments and cravings because we often encounter them in our meditation practice. How can we alleviate fear by following the Eightfold Noble Path? The teaching outline consists of 8 practices to address virtue, concentration through meditation, and insight into the true nature of things or wisdom. I'm not going to go into that here because I've covered that already. While the Buddha was traveling in the wilderness as an ascetic seeking the truth of life, he was asked whether he had fear of all the forest creatures, of being lonely and the hardships he faced. He answered that he had no fear because he sought to purify his mind and do no harm. He offered instead goodwill and compassion. He said that people are fearless when they are virtuous by following moral disciplines. Fearlessness is bidirectional. Say that again. Fearlessness is bidirectional. If one human being can offer security and freedom from fear to others through their behavior, that is the highest form of dana one can give to all living beings. Meditation practice results in concentration of the mind, enabling us to see our fears arise, recognize them as delusion, identify them as temporary, and move on, not attaching to them. With proper attention, the cause of these negative mental states, such as anxiety and fear, can be observed and addressed. I don't want to confuse mental illness with anxiety and fear, even though with mental illness you can have those. If you have mental illness, it's really important to address those issues. with a professional. The insight we have from the practice will help us understand the nature of our fear in an uncertain world. The fear is caused by our own desires and attachments. Some desires are necessary in our lives, and we can deal with them when they are not overwhelming and interfering with our well-being. So let me add this final thought about the Zen Center and my encountering fear. This is on our website. The purpose of the Zen Center is to provide a place where people can examine their lives, their intentions, their relationship to the world. The ultimate solution to the problems facing our world is a foundational change in each of our individual lives, a change in our attitude, facing our own greed, anger, and delusion, and converting these into generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. The Zen Center provides this place where this transformation can be practiced, taught, and supported. Let me reiterate. To me, practice is about seeing those fears that we encounter, recognizing the delusion, identifying that it is temporary, and not attaching to it. I'm not suggesting there is no threat, that there is nothing to fear, or that we hide our heads in the sand, or that we succumb to some nihilistic view of our circumstances. If we can recognize the conditions we cyclically experience and intervene when these thoughts and processes manifest, we can intervene and transform our unskillful fear of reaction to more skilled observation of the moment. We can also manifest more compassion and patience with ourselves and others, cultivating wisdom through our direct experiences in our Zazen practice, allowing us to slow the rapid-fire mind and to see our fears arise. I want to end with another poem, this one by Thich Nhat Hanh, and then I'll be done. It's called, "Please Call Me by My True Names. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving to be a bud on a spring branch, to be a tiny bird with the still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest, to be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower, to be a jewel hiding itself in stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am a mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I'm the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I'm also the pirate, my heart yet not capable of seeing and loving. I'm a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands. And I'm the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people dying slowly in forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the four oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, and so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up, and the door of my heart can be left open, the door of compassion.
Page 12 and 19.
May the merit of this penetrate into each thing in all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha way. Sentient beings desires are